In today's show, we have a guest joining us to discuss, was the USA justified not to condemn Nazism at the United Nations?
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Fasula and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague Tayo Boya. Tayo, hello my friend once again. I hope you're keeping safe and well.
Yeah, what the hell, Tony? What you gonna do, eh?
Our listeners and our viewers, well, our listeners won't know, but our viewers will notice we have a guest who I will introduce very shortly. But Tayo, I want you to keep up our tradition and say hello to our audience.
What tradition, man? You just forced me to every flipping week. That's okay. Hello, audience. You know what the heck and all that. Anyway, Tony.
Oh, no.
This is not good. Why is I was just asking myself, why is divorce so expensive?
Go on, then I'm going to regret asking, aren't I? Why is divorce so expensive?
Because it's worth it now. Worth every penny, baby.
Come on, our female listeners are not going to like you at all, you know. They really are not.
Well, you see, you're being sexist. How do you know it's not worth it for the women too?
Well, very
because
true.
They don't pay anything, because it's the men who lose half their house, they lose their house, half their earnings, and a large part of their pensions.
Oh dear.
Hey, I've got some advice for the men listening out there. You don't have to get married, guys. Seriously, find a woman you hate, give her your house, give her half of your income and your pension. You just cut out the middleman. That's all.
Please, audience, don't listen to Tayo's words of wisdom. Anyway, let's get on with the show.
Poor old Oscar, yes.
Yeah, we'll bring Oscar on here. Oscar, if you could, yes, reveal yourself. Hello, welcome, Oscar. Hi. Now, just for the benefit of our audience listening in, Oscar is a data analyst by day and a political analyst by night. So, Oscar, do you want to say hi to our audience?
Hello, everyone. First of all, a big thank you to Tony and Tayo for having me on the show and for that splendid introduction, Tony.
That's very good. We're looking forward to your words of wisdom, because today's topic that we're discussing, this is one that Tayo came up with, and I know Oscar's got some strong views about this, is, was the USA justified not to condemn Nazism at the United Nations? Now, Tayo, I'm going to ask you to kick this off, seeing as it was your topic to begin with. So why did you want us to discuss this today?
Well, I think the topic of Russia, especially in the context of Ukraine, is such a touchy subject between the two of us that we've decided that we can't really discuss it between ourselves. And I brought it up to you initially in the expectation that we could talk about it, because I found it ridiculous that the United States and a few other countries besides didn't support the Russian resolution at the United Nations. And over lunch at work, which is where I met Oscar, I sat down at his table, uninvited, but never mind. and I sounded off about Tony and how Tony wouldn't, didn't understand how ridiculous it was that the United States wouldn't back Russia in this. And to my amazement, Oscar was like, well, there are aspects, gray areas. And I was like, what? I came here for sympathy and understanding. And what the heck am I, what is this? So I thought, well, okay, if Tony and I are not going to talk about it, what we'll do is we'll bring Oscar in, who is a very cerebral gentleman, and I'm sure he's going to give me an argument, but we'll see.
Well, actually, yeah, Oscar, please jump in. What's your view on this topic yourself? Because I mean, Tyre hasn't put his actual allegiance on the line. He's just talked about the subject, but
Well, it's a heavy topic, isn't
it
it? And I,
is.
I want to start by first of all that saying that I absolutely condemn any form of Nazism. I think we should start by looking at the definition of Nazism. So I think a lot of people think of it as anti-Semitism, but there's also things like fascism, dictatorship, totalitarianism, and white supremacy. And after doing some research, I actually came to the conclusion that I could see where the USA was coming from. So I did think they were justified, and I define justified as having reason or good reason for doing something. So on balance, I agree with it. I think the root of what it comes down to as to what I agree with it was in 2022, the last time Russia tabled this motion, they had 105 votes in favor, 52 against, and 15 countries abstained. Now, much of the Western world voted against: France, Europe, UK, much of the European Union, and obviously the USA and Ukraine. A lot of countries that voted against this cited political reasons and the fact that it was coming from Russia. Some felt it was an excuse for Russia to excuse its invasion of Ukraine and to excuse some of its history of Russian rights, to excuse some of its history of human rights violations.
Brilliantly put. If you don't mind my saying so, I think encapsulated your part of your end of the spectrum quite admirably.
Well,
Where
thank you.
I seriously take issue with you is, and I was thinking about how to even present my argument, and it boils down to, in thinking about our different positions, to me, it boils down to something like this. Either you're a black and white man, or you're a shades of gray man. And I think I've got Tony as a witness that I'm a very black and white person. I don't see shades of gray because I don't believe in shades of gray. I'm not saying they're not out there, just that it's not useful in human society in trying to resolve issues. If you can define it, and you started off by defining Nazism, or at least describing it more rigorously than I would have done, so well done for that. If you can define or describe what you're dealing with in a detailed fashion, so that there is no confusion as to the meaning of things, then I don't see why there's any reason for any gray. I think everything should be black and white. And when we introduce shades of gray, it's, for me, anecdotally, I don't have any statistical evidence or anything like that, or any studies to cite. But for me, anecdotally, it's usually because who am I talking about? Because unreliable, untrustworthy people are trying to muddy the waters, and they're trying to move the discussion and to use language in such a way that they believe the word is prevaricate, that they can twist things in their favor, and that's why they try to say, oh, this is all shades of gray, and I'm like, actually it isn't. And to be very precise about what I mean here in this case is that either you're for Nazism or you're against it. It's that simple to me.
I think you're simplifying it, Tyre.
Well, sorry, I'm going to be
May I
talking.
interject?
Yeah,
Oscar,
please
thank
do,
you.
Oscar. Please do.
I'm
So,
going to talk to you.
thank you, gentlemen. What I would say to that is, whilst I've tried to, I'm quite an objective person myself, but I recognize some things have shades of grey. So even though I've tried to objectively define Nazism, some of the, I've still just reduced it to words, not numbers. So I suppose fascism, dictatorship, white supremacy, I suppose those are still, to some people, subjective. And in terms of condemning Nazism, from the research I did, all the countries that disagreed with this Russian motion still condemned Nazism. They condemned Nazism, but they didn't approve of Russia using it in the way they were using it, which is sticking as an excuse for war and human rights violations, etc.
Exactly. I totally agree with you, Oscar.
So those
That's
countries,
the reasons.
and they
Political.
recognized countries like the USA that they stood with Russia against Nazism in World War II. Let's not forget.
Yeah, it's all
Well,
because Russia is using this resolution as an excuse, because it's not just Ukraine that Russia has accused of being Nazi or have Nazi establishments within it. They've also done it with the Baltic states.
Exactly.
And it's almost they're giving themselves justification. Well, if everybody's voting against Nazism, then we know it's wrong. We know they've got some in their country, so we're legitimate to put it right. And they then give themselves legitimacy to go in and invade a sovereign country. That's the reason. And also, we must understand this. This resolution is not the first time that Russia have tabled it. It's the 10th time they've tabled the same resolution. And each time they get different number of countries voting for it, abstaining, and you get the same 3 or so that always vote against it, with the USA being the primary one. So it's not just the single one. Yeah, go on.
If I may dovetail on that, Tony, if you look at 2014, for example, which was the beginning of Russia invading Crimea and annexing Crimea, 155 countries voted in favor of Russia's co-sponsored motion and only 3 against, whereas last year it was 105 in favor and 52 against. So if you look at the voting history, less are in favor broadly and more are against it. And you wonder how much of that has to do with Russia's advancing war and invasion on Ukraine and maybe indeed the Baltic states one day.
I think it's all to do with that, to be honest, because people are not looking at what the resolution is saying. It's almost to give Russia a bloody nose politically by not voting in favour of their resolution. Any other country had put that forward, the majority of those 51 countries that voted against would have probably voted for it. Because it's Russia, and because all these countries are angry with Russia's position and what they're doing to Ukraine, it's almost like a protest in their small way of adding to Russia's woes by saying, we're not voting with this resolution. We actually believe it, but we're not voting with you, just to give you a bloody nose and say, that's it. And as Oscar's already alluded to, it's they agree with it. They do. But they're choosing not to for this.
Well, I don't know that they do because they voted against resolution. And
that doesn't mean they don't agree with it.
I'm sorry. As far as from my point of view, like I said, I'm a black and white kind of guy. We're talking about, I don't conflate things. All right. If you're in a, I'm going to start moving away from a very sort of rigid, almost academic discussion. And I'm going to start looking for metaphors. The problem with the metaphor, of course, is that we end up discussing the metaphor and not the actual business. But I'm going to try this on you. You're in a crowded cinema. You know where I'm going with it. Somebody shouts fire. It turns out that the person who shouts fire is an arsonist. You don't want to hang around and start asking questions of whether he started the fire or not. You just want to take action now. And then afterwards, you can break it down and you can deal with whether, as an arsonist, was irresponsible and things like that. I'm trying to say by this that, look, are we against, you just asked me, are we against Nazism? Am I against Nazism? And the person who's talking to me, and Tony knows my attitude towards Americans, the person talking towards me is, let me not use Nazism. Am I against white supremacy, let's say? Mm-hmm. And the person says, okay, I'm against white supremacy, and he happened to be either a current or an ex-member of the KKK. Let's say he's a current member of the KKK. I'm still against white supremacy. Doesn't matter that this guy is saying that he wants to vote for. I can look into his motives and wonder why he's doing it, but I'm going to be, to me, idiotic to not say this is where I stand. I mean, I believe it. So when I was preparing for this, in my mind, I should have done some research on what is the principle. I believe in principles. On principle, I am against Nazism. Finish. And on principle, I will always vote against Nazism because it doesn't matter who's bringing up the vote. I can say other things afterwards and say, yeah, Russia, you are against Nazism. Thank you for that. But why did you invade Ukraine? We can get back to the substantive issue.
Okay. But why are Russia choosing to put the same resolution again?
Mm-hmm.
For what end? They've already had it voted. This is the 10th time.
Yeah.
How many more votes do they need? What do they want?
No, I'll tell you what they want. Thank you for asking me. They want to denazify Ukraine. Ukraine is Nazified. And President Putin said at the start of the special military operation, we are going to. He didn't even say we want to. He said, we are going to. This is why it's a war till the end, until Ukraine has been defeated or there's a global nuclear holocaust. It's one of the two options. A lot of people don't seem to understand that, and they're talking about defeating Russia. And Russia has said, no, either we win in Ukraine or we will destroy the planet. The people miss the memo. And the reason they're going to destroy Ukraine is that 26 million Russians died at the hands of Nazis in 1945. By 1945.
Right, and that was Germany Nazis. Yeah.
Maria Zakharova, you don't know who she is. She's the Russian, she's the spokeswoman for the Russian Foreign Ministry. Only, I think last week, was talking about this fact that in every single household in Russia, well, sorry, nearly every single household in Russia lost at least one member to that war. And you think they're going to just let it just rise up again on their border after giving various warnings? So, of course, this is why they keep on, you ask me a question, I'm answering. That is why they keep on hammering about it, that you guys, there's a growing Nazi presence in Estonia, in the Baltic states. They're already entrenched, fully entrenched in Ukraine, where they were making laws that are frankly outrageous by anyone's standards.
Give us some examples of that to justify that
not allowing
claim.
Russians to speak their own language in the Donbass area. Why do you think there was a civil war? Why do you think there was a civil war? What was the point? What was the problem? The problem was they were telling the Russians to stop being Russian, to stop speaking Russian. They didn't want them teaching Russians in the schools. They stopped them from teaching Russians in the school. They sent the Azov Brigade to the Donbass areas and to Lugansk to enforce this. For 8 years, President Putin was saying, what the heck is going on here? It's not even Putin. Everybody mixed about Putin. The Russians were complaining, like, what's going on? Estonia, they've been dragging down the statues of the Soviet liberators. Okay, there's a lot of muddy water here. You guys love great shades of gray. Thank you for I can understand the Estonians and the Baltics and the Poles and others. Thank you very much for helping us liberating us from the German Nazis. But you then have to fold us into the Warsaw Pact and basically colonize us for the next number of years. So yeah, it's not see, I told you it's all black and white with me. It's like, thank you for the help, but why did you occupy my country afterwards? But that's a separate thing from allowing Nazism to raise its ugly head again. I'm black, man, guys. Okay, you two will probably be all right if the Nazis make it back to power.
The Nazis are not making it back to power.
If they make it back to power, you guys will be all right. So I've actually got skin in the game. Literally. No, literally.
That's nonsense.
What do you mean? What do you mean nonsense, Tony? If you are
Nazism is not going to rear its head and come to the forefront again.
You don't do that. When somebody's laying down an argument such as I do and say, if this happens, you can't say it's not going to happen. How do you know it's going to happen?
Because I'm trying to tell you that it's not going to happen. You've made a claim.
Guarantee?
You've made a claim.
You didn't even oppose it in the UN.
Right.
Yeah.
This is all part of the same. What I was saying. This is a political issue. It's to do with the fact that Russia have proposed it, and not many countries are happy with Russia at the minute because they've invaded Ukraine. And it's Russia who are saying the fascism is there. There's no one else.
What do you mean no one else is saying it?
Who else is saying it?
Let's ask Oscar. Oscar, what do you know about your political scientist,
analyst,
science aficionado? What do you know about fascism in is there fascism in Ukraine and in the Baltics?
I've not researched that particular topic, but I do feel like there are waves of fascism happening in areas of Europe and in the US, and historically it has happened in certainly Spain and Italy around World War II.
Mm. Okay. So have you heard of the Azov Brigade?
Sorry,
Have you heard of the Azov Brigade?
I have not. No.
Right. Okay. Has Tony heard of the Azov Brigade?
Yes, I've heard of the Azov Brigade.
Did I send you the symbolism of the Azov Brigade?
Yes.
All right. Are you aware that
now,
symbolism
you're a
was
facts,
Nazi?
you're a black and white facts and evidence man.
Yeah.
Does the Azov Brigade emblem, does it match the Nazi symbol?
Yes.
Match it 100%, because you're black and white.
It's not 100%.
No, you said you're a black and white individual.
Yeah.
You go, you don't have shades of grey.
Yeah.
So does this symbol resemble the Nazi symbol?
It does
100%?
resemble, but not 100%. No.
Then it's grey.
You said does it resemble, but not 100%.
Right. So resemble in a word is a grey, isn't it? And you're using grey.
I don't know if you can see this.
No.
You
You have to take your background
blurry,
off in order
I'm
to see it.
Yeah. Sorry?
It was
No, there was nothing on there. I just wanted to see if I could just draw.
No. We know that it uses 3 arms to describe the symbol. For the benefit of our audience who are only listening and not watching, the Nazi symbol, the Nazi symbol, everyone is familiar with that. There's 4
the swastika, basically.
The swastika, yeah. There's 4 elements of the curve, not the curve, the lines that fork off. The Azov symbol has 3. Okay.
That's not even the one we're talking about. We're talking about the black sun, by the way. It's the black sun. That's the one that we're talking about. That's the main patch that is the closest match to the Nazi symbol.
The black sun.
Yeah. There's the black sun, and then there's the death's head with the skull and crossbones with the death's head with the that was popularized in movies by the German SS.
Yes.
Yeah. So those are the 2 major symbols, but the black sun is the main one. And by the way, if anybody wants to research this, you're probably going to have to use a browser such as Yandex, because other browsers tend to suppress the search engine. But Yandex is a browser, and its own search engine will actually deliver results to you. You can also, so I'm suggesting to people that don't take Tayo's word for it. Look up how did the Russian army, right, or Russian army identify Nazis in Mariupol. It's very simple. They asked them to take their shirts off, and tattooed on their torsos were proper, fully 100% Nazi symbols. That's how they identified remember the people in the was it a mine or a steel? Oh, sorry, the Azovstal Steelworks. Remember?
Steelworks, yeah, where people.
Yeah. So when they came out from the Azovstal Steelworks, it was very, very simple. Take your shirt off. That's all they needed to do. And there are videos, especially on Telegram. You can get videos of the soldiers there. So actually, to answer to your question is yes, there are 100% resemblances.
But the Azov Brigade symbol isn't a Nazi symbol.
Not the Azov Brigade symbol itself, no. Not the trident. I mean, the trident is the trident. Actually, if you think about the marches, okay, I've forgotten what they're called. The marches in Munich in the 30s, early 30s. You know, those huge Nazi marches by candlelight and so on and so forth. Actually, they were carrying the tridents. The actual swastika was used as the emblem on war machines, on especially I think the aircraft.
Yeah, the aircraft had it predominantly. Yeah,
and then Hitler's cars and things like that. So the exact symbol. I mean, I'm not a Nazi. The exact symbolism. I don't fully follow. I don't know if Oscar can shed some light on this. Can you?
Shed some light on what? Sorry.
On Nazi symbolism of the Nazi symbols. The swastika and this trident. I can look it up actually.
That's not my area of expertise.
Yeah, not a Nazi.
However, as beyond Nazism, part of the reason behind my argument is not a point I necessarily agree with, but in doing my research, in 2017, for example, when the US yet again went against this Russian motion, they also cited and or President Trump cited free speech as a reason for going against it. Other countries, Germany comes to mind, have stronger hate speech or free speech laws, but in the US, American citizens can say just about anything they don't want to, even to the extent of praising Hitler followers. That part there I don't agree with, but it is what it is. So I think Trump in the US felt another reason for voting against this motion was that it would infringe on the rights of the free citizen, infringe on the rights of their citizens in regards to free speech, as tabled in, I think, one of the amendments, maybe the First Amendment.
Of the resolution.
Sorry, the amendment of the Constitution.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay.
Sorry.
So this resolution that Russia put forward, let me get this right in my head here. So Russia put that amendment forward, but when Trump was in power in 2017, he voted against it because he thought it would go against the First Amendment of free speech in the US.
That's the understanding I came to by voting, and it's not a point I agree with, but I suppose voting for the motion meant, or might have meant, having to tighten up the free speech laws, because at that time, 2017, Americans were allowed, apparently, I was surprised, but they were apparently allowed to vocally praise Hitler followers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what are we saying then? There's something in this UN resolution, as well as obviously high level, it's condemning Nazism. What else is in there then for the Trump administration to believe it would be affecting free speech? So what is in this resolution?
No, you got it wrong. No, you don't understand. And Oscar, I'm going to say what I think
Please do, please.
And then you can correct me if I'm wrong. No, what Trump was saying is that the people bringing it forward, the Russians, were not in a position to bring this resolution to the United Nations because there is no free speech in Russia, according to Trump. And that by backing the resolution, it would be the equivalent of
suppressing free speech?
No.
You think? Sorry, go on.
No, actually, no, I'm wrong. I think I'm talking nonsense. No, actually, I think the resolution is that we should part of the resolution was that we should suppress the glorification of Nazism, and
if you're suggesting the US thought Russia was hypocritical in bringing this motion forward, now that I agree with.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Actually, we can go back to that, and I don't mind discussing that. No,
yeah, I'm intrigued by that.
What you would be. I think what Tony needs to hear is that the reason Trump was against it was that the resolution calls for action to be taken against those who glorify Nazism. So if you're in America and you want to glorify Nazism, and the American state has signed up to this, then they can't stop you from glorifying, and they stop you from glorifying Nazism. They're actually infringing on your free speech. You see?
Right, I see.
That's the point I was making.
Sorry. That's
right. That makes more sense, and that would then obviously that does make sense because if it's in their First Amendment, then there's no way ever they're going to agree with this wording in this resolution. So they're going to oppose it every single time based on their First Amendment of free speech. Because even though if you were going to ask every individual American, majority of them would probably say Nazism is abhorrent and they don't agree with it, but they still would give the right to someone to say they follow it because that's their right. And you can't suppress that right. So their freedom of speech is so ingrained in their First Amendment that even if someone wishes to say something as horrible as I love Nazism, I want to rid X amount of people, they've got the right to say it, but clearly they haven't got the right to implement it. But the US don't want to remove that ability for them to say it. Now in Europe, we're a little bit tighter. We wouldn't really want people to say it in the first place. Whereas
exactly,
in
and that's why
America,
countries like Germany in particular have a stronger stance against free speech than or tighter laws around free speech than the US.
yeah, so they're not totally free.
I find your position on this, Tony, reasonable. It's really hilarious.
Why is it
You,
Come on,
I'll tell you
explain.
why. I'll tell
Go
you
on.
why. In America, just or even in the UK, just stand up in a public square now and say that a trans man isn't a man and a trans woman isn't a woman. Go on, I dare you.
In the UK,
Yeah, go
yeah,
on.
I know, but we
Go
haven't got.
to
We're not America.
go to
I never said we had free
Speaker's
speech
Corner.
here.
Okay, let's talk about America then.
Okay.
On the campuses in wherever in America, you just stand up and you point to a trans. I never remember who's who. What's a trans man? Is a trans man a man, or is it what's it saying it? I don't
I
A
think
understand.
trans man is a female that's transitioned to a man.
Okay.
Yeah, and the trans and the gender is the gender they've become.
Yeah.
Ah, right. Well, very nicely put. Okay, so I think I'll remember that in future. So you point to a trans man and say that's not a man. You point to a trans woman and say that's not a woman. You're going to be that's hate speech. So don't tell me about free speech. Free speech is in the eye of the beholder. Don't make me laugh. That's hate speech. And you still can't you can't use the N word in America, as I understand it. And I mean,
Oh, yeah.
can you?
I
Right?
mean,
Well, a white
yeah,
person certainly
You
can't.
cannot use it. Well, it's highly condemned. I've actually lived in America for a chunk
Oh,
of
right.
time,
Tell
and
us your
it's
when
highly
did you?
condemned and highly frowned upon, as it should be.
Hmm.
What's interesting though is that
Was it illegal though? Is it illegal though? I want to
No.
know. No, hey, no. Let's say what Oscar thinks.
what's I don't have a definitive answer on
I think it
whether
can be
it's
hate.
illegal or
If
not.
he's used as hate speech, then hate speech is definitely illegal.
Yeah, as I yeah, this goes back to one of my earlier arguments though. Some of the definitions I laid out about fascism, dictatorship, and white supremacy. I agree with you; those are kind of subjective, and I think that's the point you're making as well.
The thing is, you see, you can say what you want if you're referring to
I agree
you.
that's maybe subjective.
Yeah, the free speech is to do with you. You can say what you want about you and what your belief system is. As soon as you outwardly point the finger at someone else, then it changes to hate if you're saying something derogatory. So if you say, I love Nazism, you're saying it about you. You don't want to enact it. You don't want to affect anyone else. I'm loving Nazism. If someone were to say that, that's their free speech. They can say that if they want. Do you see what I'm saying? This is what they want to uphold. People can say what they choose. That's what free speech is. It's when you turn it around and you start attacking a third person, then it becomes hate speech. So that's when you've got to be mindful.
And jumping on your point there, Tony, from my experience in America, African Americans, for example, use the N-word amongst or to each other as a term of endearment sometimes because it's to their own.
Mm. So it's not hate speech, is it? It is
Well, I
if a
think
white
it's not
person was to
derogatory.
say it.
It's not derogatory. It's not meant. to
That's
be.
where the subjectivity comes in, because some words can, of course, be derogatory to some and not to others. I guess the safest thing is, of course, not to use them at all to avoid any risk.
Right, but then I'm saying that is that then free speech that you can actually make laws in America that, if they don't already exist, which is you can't glorify Nazism, and you can't glorify Nazism, and period. So
What does that mean? What does that mean? See what I mean? Glorifying. What does it mean?
I think it's a messy problem, but I think the best thing a country can do is say free speech with A, B, C, D, E, F exceptions. Hate speech is including but not limited to A, B, C, D, E, F.
But this is what I was trying to tell Tayo in a previous show. Freedom of speech is not free. We don't have total freedom of speech. Tayo wants to continue that and have total freedom of speech because people should say
freedom of speech is black and white. You can just say what you want.
Maybe relative freedom of speech is I know it's a bit nuanced, but maybe relative freedom of speech is a better word.
No, I said I want
that.
total freedom of speech. Say what you like.
Yeah,
Say what you like, but there are consequences, social consequences.
Yeah.
Right, and it's how society proceeds anyway. I'm just encapsulating what really happens, what actually happens, or maybe what should happen. I mean, obviously, I've lived in a military dictatorship, and there definitely didn't have free speech, so I know what that looks like. So there's freer speech within political arena, but socially, I don't know that you can walk into a hospital. I mean, what about the hospital in Bournemouth? Remember that says that men can what is it? Something to do with lactation. Is it men can lactate? Or men can it's not only women who can breastfeed. Remember?
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Right.
So not that the women can breastfeed. It's like, well, who else can breastfeed? Because I know I can't, and none of us in this right now in this podcast can breastfeed.
It's rare for men to breastfeed, but my religious studies teacher did say that men have the capacity to lactate anyway.
If you don't mind my saying, that's why he was religious studies and not biology. I'd like to have a word with him.
I've actually heard that, to be honest. I'm
yeah.
with Oscar there, yeah. That there
we
are
can,
very rare cases where
very rare.
men.
Are these the XY, the people with the extra chromosome?
I don't know the detail of that as to what the chromosome they had, but they were male. For the sake of
this discussion, when I say a man, I mean somebody with two sex chromosomes, one of which is X and the other is Y. That's my definition of a man, because I like definitions. Mm-hmm. So if someone can lactate, I think there's probably going to be a third chromosome, and that is not therefore, by my definition, a man. That's actually, I think they're called an intersexual. Is that intersexual?
Intersex. I've heard of that word. Yeah. Look, I don't know about intersex people and lactating, but you might be onto something.
Does that okay? Let's come back onto the topic that we're discussing, as we sort of made a few digressions there. Yeah. But going back to this glorification of Nazism, it's understanding what that word glorification actually means, and why the US in particular are saying that would affect their First Amendment rights. So what does a glorification in a word itself, what does that mean? If we were to describe glorification, how would that mean to glorify Nazism? What's the sort of language you would use?
Glorification to me, Oscar, do you want to go first? Because I've got an idea, but do you want to have a crack at it first?
Okay, thank you. Sure. To me, I haven't researched how academics would define this actually, but to me, glorification is promoting through words, speech, social media, etc., bringing attention to something that is by and large considered bad and or perhaps for political gain.
Okay.
Nice.
But isn't that just free speech? Really, it's just free speech?
No, I mean, we're saying, what does glorification mean?
But it's controversial. I think there's an emphasis on giving attention to something bad, giving attention to something what's the wider society considers controversial.
Okay.
Well, let me give you what
your definition.
Thesaurus.com says, glorifying means to cause to be treated as being more splendid or excellent than would normally be considered, to honor with praise, admiration, or worship, and to invest with glory. So in other words, those things, are you saying that Nazism should be treated as being more splendid and excellent than other forms of governance? Are you saying that we should invest it with honor and praise and admiration? That's the thing. That's what the Russian proposal was, that we should not allow the glorification of Nazism.
Yeah,
that's one of the things it asks for.
Okay, what if we turn that and said we should condemn the glorification of communism?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy. I don't know what the communists have done to me recently, but I'm quite happy.
Communism, where you have no longer got the ability to whatever you provide, whatever you produce has to go to the state. You have no way of speaking your mind because there's certain things are controlled within society. So is that not in the same level, but is not utopia either, is it? So they're picking on Nazism because they're seeing little pockets and
little.
Well, okay. Well, relative terms, it's little in terms of the scale of the countries. So they're seeing pockets and using that as justification to say the whole country is Nazified.
They're not saying the
So
country.
we
Be
have
very careful. It's not saying the country is Nazified. They were saying that the system has been Nazified because there are actual Nazis, known Nazis, sitting in the Ukrainian Rada, which is their government, their parliament,
okay.
and in senior positions, both in the army and in the government. And that's why
Right.
they're saying that the
So-
system is Nazified.
Okay. Are there people in every government that have right-wing tendencies?
Yeah, but before I answer that question, I want to go back to what you're saying. What were you saying just now? Because you made a mistake, and I wanted to correct it. But
I made a mistake. Okay.
Yeah. You said what did you say?
Glorification of Nazism.
Aha! Were you saying the glorification of communism? Or
Yeah.
Okay. So how are you? Are you saying that if the Russians had said, let us bring up a
Condemn
resolution,
the glorification of communism.
what would happen next? What is your point? I don't get your point.
Well, the point is, would the Americans have voted for that?
I think the Americans would have voted against anything the Russians say.
Yeah,
Even the Russians
exactly.
stood up and said Satan is evil.
No, I think they would have voted if that was the
or
case.
black is the opposite of white or something.
I think the point is they're using their justification of impeding their free speech.
No, that was Trump. That's according to Oscar. Oscar should jump in here. What am I correct in thinking that it was Trump that had that objection, and that the more recent objection was, I think I read it. I think it was Victoria Newland again. She's saying, yeah.
From the research I did, it was the Trump. Maybe it wasn't just Trump alone, but the Trump administration as a whole that singled out or drew attention to the reason of free speech as a reason for rejecting the Russian motion.
Yes,
Yeah.
but what about this time in 2022? Was it yes in 2022? What about, was it 2022 or 2023? What about that? No, 2022.
2022 was the most recent. I think it was December. I've in the research I've done, the excuse me, in the research I'd done, free speech was, I could not find reference or as much reference to it as a reason for rejecting it.
What was their justification? Could you have any more on that?
The justification was, they said that they could not, in all good conscience, support this whilst when Russia had attacked, the kind of language they use.
Yeah,
attacked the poor innocents, state, blah blah blah.
Yeah, a consistent theme among all the countries who rejected the Russian motion from 2012 to present, including the USA last year, was along the lines of it being politically disingenuous of Russia, and the fact it was coming from Russia in particular.
Yep. And it's what I've always said about Tony. What have I always said to you about, don't look at the finger pointing at the moon, look at the moon. It's back to my basic position that you could have brought up another. If I had been of any influence whatsoever, I'd have said we're going to stand shoulder to shoulder with Russia to condemn Nazism. Let me I'll finish my thought.
Let me give you something. Let me give you something why the Americans actually declined it.
Because
they actually asked for an amendment to it and they would vote for it.
Yeah.
And the Russians chose not to. The Americans actually said they wanted the Russians to revise it. This is now 2020's one, not the 22 one. The 22 was obviously completely different because the Americans had fallen out royally with the Russians for the actual invasion of Ukraine. But in 2020, when the Russians proposed it then, the Americans actually asked them to amend it. The Russians refused because Americans thought it was unacceptable restrictions on freedom of expression. And they wanted to make the amendments to improve and strengthen the resolution, to make it better. If they tweaked those, they would have then voted for it. But the Russians did not want to remove it. And so the Americans again voted against it. So there's a bit of to-ing and fro-ing here. It's not all black and white. The Russians proposed it. Americans flatly denied it.
Americans always lie, black and white. End of story. 100% of the time, Americans lie. If an American tells me that he wants to improve something, I know that actually what it means is he wants to destroy it. So my app, without even searching any further, I mean, I'll have to look it up and everything. But my gut instinct is straight away hogwash, because whatever the American government says, I automatically know, I assume and know and take on board, and I'm fully convinced it is the diametric opposite of anything the American government says. Every war of liberation is a war of enslavement. Everything that is an improvement is actually a deterioration. This is the empire of lies. This is the heart of the empire of lies, of our system of global deceit that exists today, is because of the American system. So I'm with the Russians on this straight away. Just like straight away, they wanted to improve it. Pull the other one and you'll hear bells go off. Go on, pull it. Ding, 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 ding. There you go. Pull the other one. Give me that of Americans.
Just
what?
for our listening audience and not watchers, Taya didn't actually pull anything. He just made the sound. just to clarify. Okay, let's. I mean, Oscar, you were going to jump in there. Were you going to?
Thank you. If I may, I found this amendment to the motion that Australia put forward, and I feel it best summarizes my position on the topic. And I'm quoting here from the newspaper Le Monde.
Okay.
Australia felt the Russian Federation has sought to justify its territorial aggression against Ukraine on the purported basis of eliminating neo-Nazism, and underlines the pretextual use of neo-Nazism to justify territorial aggression, which seriously undermines genuine attempts to combat neo-Nazism.
Oh.
And that last bit in particular, they acknowledge that Nazism is very wrong, but they also acknowledge that territorial aggressive attempts seriously undermine genuine attempts to combat Nazism.
Yeah, so I love that. So that's fantastic. So you're Russian.
That's a bit.
You're Russian sitting in Moscow. You're Russian sitting in Moscow.
Russia politically dismissed that as hogwash, but
well,
I'm saying you're a Russian sitting in Moscow, and you look out to the west, and you see. I've said this before in the previous podcast. You see commotion in the distance, and lo and behold, it's the French, hoving up towards you, and you end up burning down Moscow in order to get rid of Napoleon. Then a few decades later, you see commotion in the West, and this time it's Hitler hoving up and his mob hoving up, and they're going to Leningrad and burning the place down to the ground again. And now you see a commotion in the West. Seriously, when do you think people are going to learn and go, do you know what? We've had enough of this nonsense. When do you think? Whether you accept it or not, because a lot of people are talking nonsense about what Gorbachev said or was told or wasn't told. The Russians say and claim that they were told that NATO would not move 1 inch further to towards Russia, and now NATO actually wants to put nuclear missiles on Ukraine's borders. And Ukraine is filled to the brim. The system is filled to the brim with these people who have a gut hatred of Russians, i.e. the Nazis. But
you're blurring the lines here, because you're now including NATO in a UN resolution. It's got nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
you're blurring two topics.
Yeah, but the UN resolution is supposed to go back, and Russia is supposed to say that they didn't have any reason. That was a false pretext for them to go. No, you can't have a false pretext. That's redundancy. If the pretext is false, it was a pretext for the Russians to go into Ukraine. So I'm condemning Nazism, but I'm using it as a pretext. But I'm sitting in my apartment in Moscow, and I'm looking over towards the west, and I'm seeing what I'm seeing, and you're telling me I'm not seeing it? What does that mean? Who's going to accept that? Who's going to accept that?
Did anyone say? I mean, did anyone say that there wasn't seeing Nazism at all?
Oh, if what Oscar's just read out to us, that about what the Australians, the Le Monde, what was in the Le Monde newspaper report, then obviously they're saying it was a pretext. Then they're saying there was no real reason for them to say that they're Nazis and neo-Nazis.
Could they not have been exaggerating the point more than what it was? And this is their way of justifying to go in and invade the country. When in reality, it's got nothing to do with Nazism. It's
After
got to do with the fact that they believed that Ukraine was going to join NATO. And Nazism, with the prevalence of Nazism, was their justification to go in and clean the country out of Nazi troops, when in reality it was all to do with the fact they didn't want Ukraine to join NATO and position nukes so close to their border.
Well,
You make an interesting point, Tony. This is just my opinion, but I think Russia tries to convince the world that the Baltic states have Nazism, whether that is present there, or not, as some pretext for an invasion and a pretext for stopping them from joining NATO. Interesting point.
It's
the
a
Baltic states are
justification
in
factor.
NATO. The Baltic states
Sorry?
are in NATO.
The Baltic states are now in NATO.
They are in NATO.
Okay, sorry. Well, Ukraine. Not being NATO.
Ukraine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. So if we, I'll try to find it in good time. I remember when Merkel went over to not just Merkel, when Merkel, I can't remember Hollande doing so, because I wasn't really following events that closely at the time. But certainly the present chap, what's his name, Nicolas Sarkozy.
Sarkozy,
Yeah,
who was president.
Yeah,
so
former
Merkel
French
of
Prime
Germany,
Minister.
that's right, Sarkozy of France. I know that when they've been going over to during the period between 2014 and 2021, I think, when President Putin was asking them to lean on the Ukrainians to abide by the Minsk agreement, I know that he was also mentioning the issue of Nazis and saying that, the neo-Nazis, they call it. I don't know why they call it neo-Nazis, but I suppose they're not the old ones. So that existed at the time as a problem that the Russians were highlighting. So why would you turn around in 2022 and then say that they were using it as a pretext? I mean, they've been highlighting it. It's just you guys, the West wasn't listening. So
Okay, let's give an example here. If Russia are at the left end of the spectrum, being communist in their regime, whether they are still communist, I'm still unsure, but they're still left leaning in terms of the way that their government is run. Okay, so anything to the other side is against their system. Okay, so anything that's right wing to communists is almost perceived as Nazism, whereas if countries have got a middle of the road democracy, when they see right wing people, it's just a little bit removed from their perception, and they think Nazis are further down the spectrum. So I don't know, are Russia looking at right-wing groups within Ukraine and viewing them as Nazi when they are just right-wing? It could be quite right-wing, but they're not quite at the Nazi stage, because you've still got levels of movement here. You've got communism one end, Nazism on the other end, and then in between you've got shades of grey. You've got right wing, which is over to the Nazi end, but not
wrong.
quite.
You're totally wrong. You're horribly wrong.
Why am I horribly wrong?
It's like the fiercest quarrels. I'm quoting someone, but don't ask me who. The fiercest quarrels are between brothers. Actually, Nazis and communists are both on the left. Let's not forget that it's the National Socialist Party. That's socialist. That's what Nazi, that's National Socialist. That's a Nazi, right? They're both on the left. Nazis are not right-wing.
They are right-wing.
Sorry?
Nazis are right-wing, completely.
National Socialist, that's the
That's
name.
not what
Nazi.
they're doing, though. Nazis are not. It's fascism.
No. It's the argument was between two factions of lefts. That is the communists and they were supposed to work together. They were even going to try to work together. Stalin thought they could work together. Do you remember? And Hitler stabbed him in the back.
Yeah, because they're poles apart. That's not how it works.
If I may interject,
okay.
Please.
Let's talk to our political scientists.
My take is part of the. That's interesting. You mentioned socialism being part of the name for Nazism, because from my research, Nazism also includes fascism and fascism,
Yeah.
fascism notably in Spain, to name one example. Just before the World War II and the Spanish Civil War, fascism is a far right ideology.
Mm. So it is far right. So fascism and
No.
Nazism are not are similar. What's the difference between someone who a fascist and a Nazi government?
I think, well, the way I saw it from my research is fascism is a subset of Nazism, I suppose. Like all Nazism includes fascism, but not all fascism includes Nazism, if that makes sense. Like squares and rectangles.
Yeah, but fascism doesn't. I mean, they're quite brutal in what they do, but they don't have genocide like the Nazis do. Nazis picked all different races and classed them as beneath them, and they wanted to eradicate them. I don't think fascists are quite at that level. I'm not condoning them by any means, but they're not exterminators of whole race of people, and that's why Nazism is another level again.
Here is Nazism from the Wikipedia page. This is that's the actual page, Nazism and Wikipedia. Nazism, and then it gives it in German. The common name in English for National Socialism.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that's what they're practicing. It's just a name.
Nazism is a form of fascism with a disdain for liberal democracy and the parliamentary system. It incorporates the dictatorship, fervent anti-Semitism, anti-communism, which is the problem with the communists, scientific racism, white power, and the use of eugenics. Please visit the...
Yeah. Well, that's not communism then, is it? They
No one said it was. I said, well, they're both left-wing. It's not right-wing. It's socialist. Since when was socialist right-wing? For goodness sakes, man.
But that's not socialism. That's far removed from socialism.
Well, it might be, but they actually say that they're socialists. And
yeah, but that's not what they're practicing. They're absolutely not
blame me
what
for
they're
that,
practicing.
seriously. They said they're socialists, and if they're very bad socialists, they're very bad people, period.
Socialists, is spreading it all out, isn't it? It's giving people autonomy and power and decision making.
Don't you think that's what Hitler sold the people that it was going to do for them?
Maybe exactly. He did, but he didn't. He took the control and then became fascist. And Nazism, he took it to another level further, which was brutality and elimination of races. That's what Nazism.
You're conflating the practice of the thing with its philosophy.
Okay.
So its philosophy was supposedly a socialist philosophy. It wasn't.
Okay.
There could have been bad. There could have been bad socialists.
Okay, I'm bringing it back to the topic that we're talking about. So this claim that Russia, for the UN resolution, are saying we should condemn Nazism, correct? Where are we having Nazis or neo-Nazis in Ukraine that are doing what the Nazis of Germany did during the Second World War?
And the Rada, in first of all, are you aware that the most outlets most media outlets have been shut down? Do you know that in Ukraine? It's been complained about by a U.S. Congresswoman, saying that these people were supporting. They're shutting down media outlets they don't like. They've kicked out the Russian Orthodox Church, and they're creating their own Ukrainian Orthodox church.
So they're messing around with. They had it already. They had an alignment.
They were all one church. They were all one church.
They were aligned to the Russian church, but they weren't part of the Russian church.
There was only
one
patriarch.
There's
one patriarch, and that's Patriarch Kirill.
Yeah, that's from Russia, but they had their own patriarch in Ukraine. They were aligned.
I'm not going to argue about that because
I do know this.
We'll come back to that. You sound very sure of yourself. I'm sure I'll shoot it out of the water. Like you're very sure that.
No, I can tell you that because of family. There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
Then, but then obviously the level of separation at least wasn't what it is now. So
no, it's huge now. Exactly, they were quite aligned.
That is the state interfering with religion. So I don't know where you're stopping. And then obviously,
I don't think the states did it themselves. I think the Ukrainians did that themselves.
Actually, it came from Zelensky. It came from Zelensky as a presidential order. So
because Kirill was supporting the invasion, so that's why.
Kirill was calling for peace and wanted people to sit down and negotiate. And
that's not what I've read.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're reading.
Okay.
Maybe CNN.
Look, I'm mindful we're getting to the top of the hour here, so we're going to have to
drown out poor Oscar, haven't we?
No, I know. So we're going to ask for some sum ups here. So Oscar, first off, what's your view on our topic? Was the USA justified not to condemn Nazism at the United Nations?
It's an interesting one. I do stand. Yeah, I do ultimately still agree with the argument I put forward. I would add as well that on a global scale, I think it's justified. If going back to one of Teo's earlier examples, if it was a pure individual condemning a KKK leader, condemning white supremacy, then that's a more contained, more individual example. So that I think should be condemned. But when it's global and when there are countries at stakes, I think it's inevitable that politics and morals get intertwined more than on an individual level.
Absolutely. Thank you there. Tayo, what's your particular view? Because you never actually answered this question. Was the USA justified not to condemn Nazism at the United Nations?
The USA was not justified. Nobody is ever justified. Nobody is ever, under any circumstances, justified to not condemn Nazism. We must all be dead set against Nazism, and there should be no reason there should be no reason to say anything afterwards. It's do you condemn Nazism? Yes. End of story. There's no need to qualify that, because it should be an absolute position for all logical and rational and decent human beings. That's my position. So yes, definitely, 100%.
I agree. It should be a straight rejection, but the reality, I think, is the world is messier. I suppose, strictly looking at the question, was the USA justified not to condemn Nazism at the United Nations? Then I would argue not justified. But I suppose if you include in there, were they justified not to condemn Nazism at the United Nations table by Russia? Then that's where I agree with the justification more.
Exactly. It's because politics is involved. They actually said in their statement that they do condemn Nazism, but we're not voting for this resolution. And that's how they ended it. So there you go. We've finished the show. But Oscar, I hope you've enjoyed being on the show here.
I certainly have. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. We loved having you on and sharing your insights.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, and from Tayo and I, we'd obviously invite you back again if we have another topic that we need your expertise on. So
what's it again? Political science aficionado.
He's a data analyst during the day and political analyst at night. So yes, Oscar, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen.
That's all right. But with that, unfortunately, we have reached the end of the show for another week.